So when we look at the stellar mythos of the lunar, and we look at the queen bee, we can understand the Virgo and the Virgin's Cape. In this region of the hidden land, when we understand the she goddess of the west, Amunet, and when we look at the queen bee and this covering, this Virgin's Cape and this protection, when we look at the oracle bone script, and we see here the connections with the Ama and the water deities that we find in West Africa, dealing with the Yami, that also are connected with the Mayan people here. When we understand the Great Basin and the cosmic tree of the Quiche, we understand the G people, and the four directions, so from the northern and southern, eastern and western hemisphere, that encompasses this Great Basin of this ring of fire. So when we look at the water deity Shakamu, and you see this bowl, understand what that represents. So we look at the Kefra and the rising sun in this great basin of the ring of fire. As we see the four standards, you got to understand the northern hemisphere, the eastern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere. These are these four holders of the sky. We understand the four sons of Horus, right? It's another depiction of how these four cardinal points, or these four parts of the hemisphere, northern, southern, eastern, and western, are encompassed in this great basin in the ring of fire. So when we understand this motion of the pilgrimage of the sun and Deborah, the Keparah, and this land. So when we look at the Bakabs or the beetle, we got to understand this great basin. And when we look at the deities, the fertility seas, the Yami, and the water deities, and the connection with Mesoamerica and the worship of fertility, agricultural deities, you understand the mound builders, Mu, and this culture here in America. So when you look at the mother, Deborah, we have to understand when we look at Deborah and Keparah, right, and this covering, the coffin, this sarcophagus, this dead land, the dark land. When we look at Sakar, this darkness, the land of dusk and dawn. When we understand these twilights that measure the sunset and sun rising, right, we understand that in the setting, right, the civic is the first setting light, the nautical, and then the astronomical, right? So we understand the milk and honey and this protection of this land, and the rising and setting of the sun, and Deborah, the queen bee, in the horizon, and this mythos of death and life, and this completion of perfection. So this darkness, or this coffin, or this restriction, or this bind to be within this darkness was measured in this 144 degrees of darkness. And the other 216 degrees, right, were lights. And these twilights is what restricted or left this tent. So when we look at Sut and the anointing and the painting of the submerging of the blackness on these Mesoamerican priesthood, and why one would make himself jet black. When we look at the Black Panther, so we look at the zoo types in darkness and Sut and the anointing, and the mound builder, this prehistoric culture, this empire, and the building of the mounds. When we understand the cross and the Kefarah and the pilgrimages of the sun, and this formation of a ball surmounted with the cross. When we look here at how these beetles, right, and their forming of these heaps or these mounds, these balls of earth to give life. When we understand the meaning of Moab, or the mother that came from the father. So it was this ability to create without male seed is to what, when we look at the Kephara and Moab, and where these snakes and this androgyny of explaining how the earth or these primordial mounds produce both X and XY, when we understand male and female, when we look at the book of the scriptures, the Holy Bible, where it says the gods created male and female. So we understand that the earth, the material existence, is always looked at as a woman, Mother Earth, and the primordial waters of the mother's waters, is where we get the extraction of both XX and XY, the primordial, the celestial waters of the firmament of the heaven. All of these things were looked at as a primordial existence of waters that came from Mother Earth, from the material existence. And this Amunet, when we understand the she goddess of the West and this location of the Western Hemisphere, all the way from West Africa, from this region of the 0 degrees of Ghana, all the way to the 180 marker of Mut, where we understand this personification of death and this understanding of the sun dying from Tammuz. We understand this ritual of Tameri, Tammuz, and Tammuz is during this time of the Cancer. So we understand this crossing of the King's Court into this time of the annual flood, right, to the rebirth of the new year of this season, which takes place during the time of when we understand the winter solstice and during this time of Sagittarius, where this death of the sun takes place, where we look forward to the spring equinox of the springing forth. So these locations of the ring of fire and this beetle and this great basin, when we look at Deborah and the Queen Mother, the primordial mound and the primordial beginnings and the creation of the borders and landmarks that would be essential to the calculation of times, to develop the calendar, to develop these 36 deacons, which would be responsible for the counting of the whole 360 degrees of this annual process. So we look at these mound builder culture and Amu and the Moors and this ancient understanding we understand to extract from light, the Y chromosome and the sprouting air, and this tree, the sprouting tree, the branch, the root of Jesse, the stem, you know what I'm saying, family tree. So we look at the mound builders, just mound culture of the ancients. We look at Keppera and the Queen Mother Deborah of the South. Understand that this location of the oracles, the spoken oracles in this land, and the solar mythos and dealing with the funerary processions and leaving these coasts here of the Scorpio coast at the 120 degrees west, which was the border of the other side of the sun setting, to cross over death, right? And to rise and to be rebirthed with the sun's rising in the land of the Orient, the land of the rising sun. This is why these regions here of Asia, of the Sedona plate, where the sunken continent, which shows proof of this seduction zone of this ring of fire, which is this great basin, this bath. So when we understand Bathsheba and these terms of the dwelling, when you look at the Shin, you see the Shin prevalent here. This is where you see the Shin, the three bars there. When we understand Dabar and creation and the primordial mounds, we have to look at this region of the Scorpio from 120 degrees west to the region of Aquarius, 120 degrees east, where we see this great basin. This is where we see this beetle. We understand this region is where the sun dies, and how we get this Tammuz, Tameri during the time of July. We understand the methodology behind the topological zodiacs and the calculation of the stellar mythos, and providing this stellar mythos connection between heaven and earth to make these land regions, right, landmark with these different stellars and mythology, to teach the language for it to be universal principles that would teach the mathematics and sciences that are common today for all universities to teach. So when we see these ancient teachers, understand that these individuals left the Americas, this land of the covering, the hidden land, Amun, the land of the north, as it's called in the book of Job. In a lot of these other towns, the north is where dead, the covering of the dead. We understand the kafara, the kepera, the covering, the coffin, the kafa. So we understand California and its linguistic significance and dealing with death. And during this time of the Sagittarius, the southern crossing, the winter solstice, we have to understand that these tellings of Heru and Set, we understand the sun and the sun setting, the rising and the setting sun, this land, the ancient people of the Alamu, these that crossed over and brought these teachings from the ancients that heard from the oracles here in this land, the bar, the spoken words, the spoken promises, Amar. So we understand Amaraka and the Ka and the soul people, and the connection between us and the sun and the soul, and the resurrection, the rebirthing, and the rebirthing of the saviors, us, the black messiahs, the heroes. Resurrect yourself, grand rising, peace.